Okay, so I'm going to go through the court claim forms. So you might have them with you, you might follow along, but I'm going to try to focus on the required information, what's required. Some of the questions are if available, if known. So I'll touch on those, but I'm really going to focus on the ones that are required. If our concern is if something is left blank that is required, it may not be considered complete once it's submitted, and we just want to avoid any gray area or anything that won't be accepted by the court. One thing I want to touch on before I dive in, as you go through the Ecology's mapping that Jay just showed, and you find your parcel, and you see, yes, I have water rights on there, and then each court claim form is going to be for one water use. So if you have irrigation, you're going to submit a court claim form. On that same parcel with the same well, you might also have domestic permit exempt use. That's a second form. You might have commercial industrial use. That's a third form. So it's not based on how many wells you have. It's not based on how many parcels you have. It's within the specific water use, what you're using, and they're stackable. So that's one thing I really want to reiterate as I go through. So we'll dig through here. Okay, so that's just the first page. Okay, so you've got this big summon packet. It's broken into the actual court claim form is broken into 4 pieces. So you have Section A, which is who is claiming the water. So the landowners of each parcel of the water use you're claiming. So if you have a water right and it's on one parcel, that's pretty clean and simple. If you have a water right that's on a couple of your parcels, the landowners, it might be you and your wife, in which case you'll be claimant 1 and claimant 2. It might be your LLC, so you just have a claimant 1. But maybe one is owned by spouse and husband and you own the LLC and they're all within the water right place of use, then you would have 3 claimants. It's kind of hard to see, but the first question is the adjudication ID, if available. So in your packets on the very first page where your address is, there's a long digit number. That is your adjudication ID. If you have it, great. If you don't, it's not required. Okay, so I said that it's broken into 4 parts. Part A, we talked about. Part B is for smaller use, domestic use. So if you're using less than 500 gallons per day, you'll fill out Part B. I'm going to skip over that today because we're going to focus on the bigger uses. So we're going to jump to Section C, and this is for larger domestic, irrigation, commercial, industrial, stock watering. So for each of those uses, you're going to fill out a separate court claim form. So the first question, what is your legal basis of water? So if you went through Ecology's website and you found your parcel and you have a water right, you find you have a water right, a certificate, a claim, an application, that water right number will be the first box there, which is what is your water right document, and then you'll list the number. If you're filling this out for your permit exempt use, that'll be the middle box. If you're filling it out, if when you go through Ag Water Board's historical photos, you've already gone through Ecology, you realize you don't have any coverage on your parcel. But as you go through the historical photos, you go back prior to the water code, 1945 for groundwater, and you see that your parcel is in ag. There was a substitute Senate bill passed through legislature that has reopened the court claim form. So you can file a court claim form or you can file a claim of pre-code water use with this court claim form. We've been labeling that SSB 5212, which is Substitute Senate Bill 5212, which is what it passed through. That's the first question. What is your legal basis of water? Next question. When did your water use first begin? So if you have a certificate or a permit, something like that, as soon as an application was submitted to Ecology, it was given a priority date. So if you have a water right document, you'll have a priority date. If you have a claim or you have pre-code use, your first steps for taken might have been when the land was cleared, and you'll look at those historical photos again and see when the first steps were taken. The next two questions are not mandatory. They're if known, and they're when construction started and when construction was completed. Your water right documents that you've downloaded from Ecology might have the actual forms in there, they might not. So if you have it, great. If not, it's not required. So C3, source of water, are you using groundwater, using surface water, or using both? C4, so if you're using surface water, you're going to fill out C4. If you're not using surface water, then you can skip it. It's not required. So if you're using surface water, and I guess I should have said anything that's highlighted is a required field here. All the other questions are if known, if available. So for surface water, if you have surface water, they want to know where does it come from? Is it coming from a stream or a creek or a river? So you select a box. What is the source name? Say Cam Ditch, that's your source name, and it's a tributary to the Nooksack River. So those are required fields. And then they ask, what is your diversion name? So if you have a name for it, a nickname for it, you can put that in there. C5 is groundwater. So if you're only using surface water, you can skip this. And these questions are all if known, if available. How deep is your well? Well, if you have a well log, you'll know how deep your well is. If you don't, if you have an older well, you won't know that, or you might not know that. Does it have an ecology well tag? Permanent exempt wells, newer wells, probably will have an ecology well tag there. Older wells probably won't. And that's okay, it's if available. And then they're asking, what do you call your wells? So if you have multiple wells, you might have one that you always call the barn well. You might have one that's the new well. That's going to help you differentiate it on this form and moving forward. So they want to know that. And then we move into C6 and they want to know the location. So where is it located? Street address. That can be pretty simple to find. Sometimes in rural properties, they won't have the numbers. It'll just say Bender Road on your county assessor page. That's fine. But you want to fill it in. That's a required section. They ask you if you know the parcel number where that well's located. Pretty straightforward. Legal description of your well or diversion. You would only have that if you've had it surveyed. So most likely not. Do you own the land where this well or diversion is located? If you do not own it, that's a mandatory field. They want to know the GPS. It's not mandatory, but it's easy to get with your phone. Get as close to your well or diversion as you can. Give it a minute to sync up with the satellite, and then you can either pin it or take a picture with an Apple phone and it'll give you that information. And if you have more than one well, there's a section at the end of C9 where you can add all of this information. So you'll have to make sure that you capture all of these questions in C9 for additional wells. So they've figured out, or they've asked now, where's the water coming from? And now they want to know, where is it being used? So where's the parcel within the place of use? On that Department of Ecology website, you'll be able to see the place of use of a groundwater or surface water right. So they want to know what's the parcel number and are there more than one parcel? So you'll add, those are required fields. And then they ask, whoever claimed this in Section A, do you own that? Do you own these parcels? Again, they ask for the address. Pretty straightforward. And then if available, do you know your legal property description? If you go onto the Whatcom County Assessor's page, it'll have it there. You can copy and paste it there. If you have more than one parcel in your place of use, then you, just like we did for the extra well, you'll add it in the section C9, which just populate it with that extra information that doesn't fit in the form. Okay, so C8, there's a number of tables in the summons. Each table, you can only fill out one table per form. So if you've got irrigation and you have domestic, just like I was saying earlier, you'll need to fill out multiple forms. But I'll walk through the irrigation just trying to help you understand what they're asking. So the first three questions are all about the instantaneous quantity of water. Sometimes you hear that as QI, and it's either measured, most often with groundwater, it's measured in gallons per minute. Most often, if you're at surface water, it's cubic feet per second. And so they're asking you, what's the peak rate that you withdraw that water currently, the historical high, and what are you going to claim? And these questions are going to repeat for the different types of use. So if you have a water right document, if it's certificated, or it will have what Ecology approved that water QI at, or you may know you have a pump, you know how to calculate that rate. The next set of questions is the QA, or the annual quantity. How much water are you using over the year? And they want to know how much you're using currently, how much you've used, the most you've used in a year in the past, and how much you're going to claim. So they're asking it for an acre feet. So you might know that in gallons, you're going to have to convert that to acre feet. And then the third set of questions is how many acres are you irrigating currently, the maximum you've ever irrigated, and what are you going to claim? And then they ask for the period of use. So if you have a water right document, it might be in the pack of documents. It most likely won't be on your certificate, but it might be in an earlier document in the application or on the newspaper clipping or on the permit. If you have a claim, you'll just think of what is the earliest date I've started irrigating and how late into the season have I irrigated. So that's, if you're filling this out for irrigation, this is the table, and then you'd move on to section D. There's other tables if you, So there's stock water table, commercial industrial. One thing I want to touch on with commercial industrial. This is stackable. So if you have an irrigation water right, but in addition to that, you fill sprayers, you use it for dust control, you wash your equipment, this is additional water. You can irrigate up to 5,000 gallons per day. So you just need to try to quantify how much you have been using. The form's kind of cut in half, so I'll show you the other half. And then it's going to ask you the period of time. So you might begin prior to the irrigation season. You might go further than the irrigation season, washing equipment or preparing for the upcoming season. The other place this would come into use, if you're growing something that you're selling and you're within that 5,000 gallons per day. So you're growing dahlias and you have a roadside stand, you can claim that water use in addition to your domestic or addition to your other uses and claim it here. So I just don't want that to get lost as you're going through it, but it would be its own claim form. And then the last one I'm going to showcase is the domestic, which has already been talked about. What I would stress is if you go through the calculator on Whatcom County's website, do it for what you're currently using. But let's use the example of your empty nesters, and there's 2 of you living there. But not that long ago, you had 4 kids, and they were showering multiple times a day. They played sports, and you were running, washing, and all of that. So calculate it for what you're currently using, and then calculate it for the highest historical use you had, And then you can decide what you're going to claim, because that house and that property, just take into account if you want to claim it for the 2 people or for the 6 people that it has supported. And then they do ask how many acres what's the size you're irrigating of acres. So that kind of goes back to what the realtor was saying pre-Hearst. It was half an acre, and that's gotten smaller if you have a newer house. And then period of use, they assume the domestic use is continuous. They're just asking about the lawn and garden. And then the last section is just remarks and explanations. So if there's something that you really need to convey, this is where you put it. If you had overflow information from those earlier questions, you make sure you populate it here. It's not required, but any additional information does need to go in here. So that's the end of section C. And then you just are ready to sign it. So each claimant that was in A needs to sign it. So if you have 3 claimants, you're going to need to print out another piece of paper and sign it. And you sign and attest that all is true. So, and then you're ready to submit. So you've either done this in a fillable PDF on their guide and file, or you're going to bring it in to the courthouse. So a lot of information, but there you go.